Hi, I'm John and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So I figured it's like the end of the year, it's fast approaching the end of December, and by this time we all have like our year-end lists rolling out. I've been seeing some of my friends occasionally slowly rolling out their year-end top 10, top 15, what's the best books, and so I figured today I would do, like, since I am quite new here, I would, it's quite I think it's quite not the standard really, but I'll be giving my 10 best books of 2022 today, in the sense that I was not on booktube then, and this was actually supposed to be my first video. This was the first time I attempted putting something out on here. It was this video in March. I started recording it, but what happened was that I recorded like 2 minutes of footage and quite got discouraged, so I deleted it, just got rid of it all. The thing is that I don't know if anyone is here from Bookstagram. It's highly likely that you might have seen the list, because I do have the list on my website for like the top 10 of last year. So if you have seen it, you might get a little different variation today, because within last year and this time this year, I have had like shift in perspectives, in not in the books per se, but like some things in this list have been rearranged since that time last year. And funny enough, the things were rearranged very recently. So enough blabbing, let's just get into the list. Yeah, so my 10th favorite novel of 2022 was A Man Asleep by George Perec. It's translated from the French. I don't have a physical copy, but I'll put the picture up here. It's about a character who suddenly one day decides like to be indifferent to the world. So there comes a day where he kind of like entirely shuts down and he stops going out, he drops out of school, and we follow him from that point in his life up to like to the end of the novel. We just see like the trajectory of like this character and how it's like kind of a descent into like nihilism in a sense, because he loses interest in the world, he loses interest in living really, but he continues to participate, not exactly participate in like daily activities, but he goes out, wakes up at odd times, goes out in the night. We see him at cinemas, we see him at bars, then we see him retreating back to his house. It's quite hard to describe what the book is about, because it's quite mundane and like more, it's kind of looking at a character's life throughout the entirety of the book. It's a very short novel, I think less than 200 pages thereabouts. So there's not really much that takes place in the novel, so we just follow this character around his nihilistic nature. And I really loved Perec's use of the second person narrative. I loved his writing. It was my second consecutive book of his I read it in succession to another book which will be mentioned later in this list, but it was my first time reading the author. That period was my first interaction with Perec as an author, and that was actually my first French translation, and I was blown away by the author's style and his look at like existence. Really, it was more, I think there was nihilism to it, but in a way too, I think it mixed with existentialism. So I was entirely fascinated by the book, and I read it at a wrong time. I was quite mentally down when I read it back in May 2022, and it knocked me out. And yeah, I loved that book so much. So that's number 10. So number 9 was a popular book, quite a popular book last year, made a splash. It's Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. I read this on ebook too, and I loved it. It's an essential book on female friendship. I loved like the stretch, looking at like Dolly's life and her relationship. It essentially looks as friendship as a relationship, and maybe sometimes as like our greatest relationship. I normally love books about female friendship, so it was everything I was looking for in a memoir, and it was, I think, read in a sense like I want to say read kind of like a literary fiction novel. So I think that was one of like the appeals to me. But aside that, I just think that it looks at a time as well. Like Dolly's life then is set in like early 2000s and in the UK. So it was on that. So for me, it was seen on another side. So like history and like somebody's history in another country, which I found quite fascinating. From the first chapter, I was sucked in like with the whole MSN I was taking, and yeah, I really loved it. I think the only thing I gave it a 4 star. The only thing that kept it there for me was like the recipes chapters, and there were these like filling chapters that occasionally sometimes they got to, you could see they were being stretched. But aside those, I recommend it to everyone. I recommend to people who love books about female friendships. Like to my female friends, I have recommended it a lot. Number 8 was I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. This was a mystery, kind of a mystery psychological, should I say thriller, but it was a mess. It was a mess, and I loved it because I was messed up at the end. So we follow 2 couples and they are going to visit the guy's parents in his family home. So they are traveling over to his family home, I think in another state or something. And so we follow them through this road trip to like the parents' house, and the sequence of events that takes place over this road trip and over like the course of the novel, like it turns you upside down, it chews you up and spits you out, because like by the end of it you are literally screaming what the hell. But it's quite fascinating in the sense that it's actually a character study, because there's a lot of like philosophical thinkings, conversations that Reid incorporates into the novel through discussions from both his characters, because they are like the central characters, the guy and the girl on the road trip. They're central characters like for maybe the entirety of the novel, and so it's this psychological and eerie element, and it kind of uses like a very heavy atmosphere to drive the story, and atmosphere only intensifies as the story goes along. And I don't know, there's just so much. I do not say much about this novel. Even in my written review, I did not speak much about the novel because I did not know how to say anything really without spoiling it. Well, I can tell you is that you are going to be messed up at the end of the novel. The writing is fantastic, the telling is wonderful, his character study is excellent. I really like it. Really puts us inside the head of the characters, and there's a lot of like these questions, there's just a lot of things happening. I just think it's a fantastic novel, and I highly recommend it. Sorry if I'm not doing justice to these books, and I'm just getting more used to the speaking on camera thing, but I promise I would better it as I go along. Number 7 is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. This was my second Flynn novel after Sharp Objects, which I read in 2021 and gave 5 stars to. I ate it up. Thing is, the major twist was kind of spoiled for me before I read the novel, because I had spoiled it for myself in a sense by going on the internet. I don't know what I looked up, but I looked something up and it gave me the major giveaway. Let me put it like that. It gave me the major giveaway, and before then I'd never really heard of like the cool girl monologue. But I read the novel, and in true Gillian Flynn fashion, it's really not just about like this horrific like mystery and stuff, but Gillian Flynn does the brave characters like best. I cite her as like maybe really the best mystery writer, because I don't think like mystery writers of the day are doing what she's doing. For Flynn, this is my second work of her. I do prefer Sharp Objects, which I loved it when I read it. I reread it this year actually, and 5 stars again. But for Gone Girl, I don't think I have to say much on it, because like a lot has been said about it. It's quite a popular novel, and it has a film with Ben Affleck and Rosamund Pike, which is actually very popular as well. So I don't think I'm going to say too much about it other than it's excellent. It's fantastic. If you like mystery books, read it. And also something I commend Flynn for is that for a mystery writer, like her writing is intriguing. She interests me with how she writes. I like how she writes characters. I think that's her strongest suit. She does like the plotty elements well, she does the twists well, but her strongest suit is what she does with characters and what she takes and makes out of them. So I totally adore this book. Number 6 was a book I read in February last year, and I have not forgotten it since then. It's a beloved book. It's quite a divisive book in a sense, but it's actually really very beloved, and it's My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh. I think last year I was really picking out all the hot books, all the darlings of the community to check off my list, and I have still not checked off a lot of them, but this was one of the ones I chose. And picking it in February, I loved it instantly. Reading it, I was blown away by the writing, and I think by then I never read any book that was written in that style, in that heavy lit fic style. So I was enamored with the writing and this very terrible character who is so terrible to our best friend, but the treatment is comedy gold, and I devoured it. I ate it up. I loved it so much. I think the humor in My Year of Rest and Relaxation is the kind of humor I enjoy in fiction. I think sometimes I always say that what will make someone else laugh is not really what makes me laugh, but if you want something, like, it's very small things for me and very different things entirely for me. So the humor in My Year of Rest and Relaxation was one of my favorite things about the novel, and the entire mundane nature of the novel, just breezing through and seeing a character, an unnamed character, who decides to sleep for a year with the help of a very terrible psychiatrist. I think, psychiatrist, and it's quite a ride. I enjoyed everything about it. Every book here I'm going to say the same thing about, I'm sorry, but I enjoyed everything about it, and I recommend it. I recommend it to a lot of people. It's one of the books I recommend for people over here, because lit fic is not like it's not really the heavy, it's not what anybody is reading, and even people who branch out to like more American fiction over here, you see it's more the mass market. I think I've said this, mass market, Nora Roberts, Daniel Steele, which nothing is wrong with. I personally detest those authors, but yes, I do recommend. I'm the one who push like this kind of books on my friends, because yes, I have been I wanted to say colonized, thank God. I have been rubbed off on by you guys. So yeah, read it. So number 5, we have gotten to the top 5, and I'm just going to speed through this because I don't know how to formulate thoughts on. It's not like I cannot formulate thoughts. If you notice, I have a website where I post my written reviews. So for books like I'm Thinking of Ending Things, Everything I Know About Love, I have reviews for them on my website, and for other books as well. But it's just that I'm just getting accustomed to the whole camera thing. So number 5, we have Where the Crawdads Sing. Again, another Bookstagram, Booktube, book community darling, which was recently adapted into a film. I read it last year in June, and it was one of the books I can vividly remember like loving last year, because I can just remember the specificity of the time in which I read it. I was in school at that time, like we're still on our strike. We had like an 8-month strike last year, from the beginning to like towards the end of the year. So this was one of the books I very much remember. I see Where the Crawdads Sings as kind of like more of a book that looks at a life story, but it incorporates this murder mystery into it that I think is excellent, and it's done well. It's woven into the story well. So at the beginning of the story, we learn that there's a death that happens in a town, and so we eventually come to like learn more about the main character Kaya and her link to this death, and really we learn more about the people in the town. We see the people that because we follow her from like when she's very young, and how she grows up, what she grows to become, people she meets along the way, the friends she makes. And I just think it's a very wholesome novel. It's a warm book. I cried. I loved it. I was so stunned by the end when I finished it. I did not expect to fall in love with it the way I did, but by the end I was won, and I wholeheartedly recommend. I give it a 4.5 star, very very near the complete 5 star. So this is the point of the list where the major rearrangement has taken place. So if you check with the websites, number 4 was actually number 2 when the list was put out early this year in January. So number 4 is Things, A Story of the 60s by George Perec, who I've mentioned earlier in the video. He's the French author, and I think Things was his debut. Yes, he said that Things did not sell. It sold very well in Europe, but did not sell so much in America. But I think the book is brilliant for fans of like fresh, original works of like fiction that is very heavy character study. I think this is for you. It looks at a time in history. We follow two young couples, Jerome and Sylvie, in Paris, France in the 60s, but really the book is actually a look at the people of their age, them and the people of their age in that time. And I think it's just a wonderful book that depicts history and like what a time was like, because I've read it twice now, and it's a very short novel, less than 150 pages I think, and I've pondered about if the novel was actually about just like these people. It just makes so much sense that it's about an actual time, about that time in the 60s, and it's very description heavy, and it depicts like the obsession of that age group. Depicts the obsession of that age group, people in their 20s, with like materiality, and how there was this desire for things but no desire to work for the things, and it's heavily seen through the main characters, Jerome and Sylvie. And I just think it's brilliant. It's a stunner for a novel. The friend who I body read with, I have recommended this to her, and she loved it as well. So I was so pleased. I think it's a short book for people. Should I use the term who like fancy novels? I know it's a silly term, forgive me, but for people who like fancy novels, in a sense highbrow novels, this is for you. It's short. I think Perec is a talented writer. I intend to read a lot of what he has written, maybe everything he has written. I have read 3 books by him now. The third is a non-fic I read this year, which was okay, yes, but it's fiction. This Thing's A Story of the 60s, it was the first one I read, and I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And that's all I can say. Please do yourself a favor, read it. I don't think you would have read anything like his writing when you get to read him. I wonder what other French writers of that time wrote like, and that's why I'm very heavily interested in reading more French literature next year. So definitely going to see. But yeah, a rec for you. So number 3 I have physically, and it's It by Stephen King. So you will come to see in this channel that I love this man a lot. I have not read a ton by him, but I have a ton of his works behind me. It's the author I have the most books of. But yeah, I read It by Stephen King last year. Mini story time, because I like to give you guys these story times. In 2021 I started this on ebook, and I got to page 900, but when I was not seeing it anywhere in Nigeria, and I was trying to get it, I was not seeing it, so I kind of fell off reading it for like 5 months, 6 months. So I think towards like June, July, for my birthday, I have friends over in the UK, because it's easier to send me books from there. I have a friend in the UK sent me this along with some like mystery books, and I was so pleased to receive it. And in October I started again, and 1,376 pages. I was done January 29th. I cried madly. I cried. I love this book. It might be like my favorite, second favorite, tied for favorite book on friendship. It's like the best book on friendship I've ever read. It's so authentic to the nature of friendship. Follow 7 friends who encounter the monster in a town and who try to face and confront this monster to get rid of it in the town forever. I think that's the easiest I can say, because I really do not like read the back of books or blog books properly myself when writing reviews. So yeah, but it's a tale of friendship, it's a tale of resilience, it's an adventurous novel, and I wholeheartedly recommend Stephen King. He's mass market that I can get behind because he's a writer's writer. I think he's a fantastic writer. His prose, yeah, I think there are some isms in his works, definitely. But I think he was the first author I read. In his first work I read, Christine, that was like the first time it was not the first time I was moved by a novel, but it was the first time I was moved by a novel, because I cried then too, and I cried reading this. I remember the day I finished this. It was a lot. I really love this book, so I don't think I'm ever going to see the film because I try to preserve it in my mind. I think I went through, the best way to put it is that I went through a journey reading this, a full journey, because it's such a big book. Like, you go, and I think it's well crafted, like the world, the town, it puts you inside the town. Like, we see the history of the town, we learn about the town. It spans, I think, 20 something years, but in just like, but we get to know the town. And I just think it's such a good book on friendship. It's such a good book on friendship. It makes my heart ache. But yeah, read it. Highly recommend. Number 2 is the book that created the review desire for me when I was in a very low place last year. It was a book I read that really sparked something in me that made me want to write on what I was reading, and just even really further propelled like my writing. And the book is The Handmade Still by Margaret Atwood. It's a very famous novel, famously banned novel as well, but I think it's a fantastic piece of fiction, one of the best ever written. Just to cite my review, not in an egotistic way, but I remember saying that it was one of the novels that reminded me why I loved the art, why I read. That's the best way I could put it, because it was what I had not read in a long time in fiction. It did something for me that I like. Once a year I wait for a book that leaves something in me, like, because of the sheer nature of it, like its brilliance. I wait for that book every year, and at least once a year I have one of those books. It was my number 1 last year. It was actually the book at top. I love this novel so much. I think like it does this, is it like the embedded narrative we are set in like future America, where women are like reduced to like less than secondary roles in this society. And I think it's essentially like the story of Leah and Jake and Rachel in the Bible, because it's cited even in the novel. So, and it's that story where the women are unable to have children, so the handmaids do the birthing for them. I really do not do social issues, not just because it's not just entirely about me not understanding like the social issues over there, because I can rationalize them, but I have Christian perspectives to a lot of things, so, but minus that, I like just the nature of this book. It speaks to the hypocrisy of some Christians, and how Christians essentially mask like very wrongdoings behind like the Bible, behind God being like, this is how it should be, where it should not be, because it's just highlights a very specific kind of evil. But I think in the grand scheme of things, I think that's one of the things that it looks at, like that's Christian exposure of like, this is how bad people who very pioneer good and God and the very like wonderful Christ, this is like how evil they can be. And I think that's what it exposes, because there are very much Christians who are like that today. I loved it for that first, and like the writing style, Margaret Atwood, like I wait for writers, I delight in getting to encounter writers that stunned me to silence. And she was one of the she was the writer last year she's not my number one, but she was a writer last year who did that thing I wait for every year. In 2021, it was A Little Life by Hanya Yankahara, and this is the book for 2022 that really touched me in many ways. I think I came undone, literally came undone when I got to the end of the novel. I think it's a masterpiece. I use the word very lightly for very few novels. I can say something is a perfect novel, and I can say something is a masterpiece, and I don't mean they are the same thing. There's the idea of it being a perfect novel as my favorite novel, but there's the idea of being a masterpiece for like just the craft and just the excellence of the craft. And I think this is a masterpiece. Yes, this is a masterpiece. So we have come to the book that's literally unseated the masterpiece, and I just did a reconsideration of like the entire list, really not the entire list, but that 1 and 2 spots when I thought of releasing this video. And it's a book that anyone who follows me on Bookstagram knows it's the book that is coming, and I have been speaking about it since I read it first in August. I reread it this year, January. It's my second 5-star last year. The Handmade Still was the first, and I love this book. I'm not going to say too much about it because I bet you guys are tired of me already. But the book is this one, Sorrow and Bliss, and I'm so glad I saw a physical copy in the country and got it like last week or something. I'm so glad I have it here to show for this video because it's like maybe my most prized possession now. It follows a woman who describes a time in her life when a bomb goes off in her head, and it's at the very beginning of the novel we see that her husband has left her. She's 40, and we get to see like her life through the years leading up to like the present. So it kind of works its way back then to the present, and there's nothing I can say about it that I have not already said. I describe this as really the best book on mental illness I have seen. When I read this, I thought of the way this had fallen in that camp of books like My Rest and Relaxation, because that's one of the reasons also why I had sought it out and chosen it. But in a way, I don't think I will read a book like that falls under like this genre of really millennial women glazing, just going through life and having something they are dealing with heavily. I don't know if I would ever read a book that can stun me as this one again. I beg you, if anything, if you don't read anything that I've spoken of in this video, even though I love all of them dearly, read this one, read this one, read this one. I think I will probably occasionally talk about it on the channel more as days go by, but I do have a written review of this on my website, link below. So yeah, and that brings us to the end of this video. I think it's going to be a much longer one, but I hope you had a nice time. Please, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, help me share, and subscribe to the channel if you have been enjoying the content so far. And I assure you there's very many more to come. The year-end lists are going to be rolling out. There's a wrap-up for last month potentially, but yeah, the year-end lists are set in stone. Also, I know it's like 2023 current year, but before like we all start discussing our favorite books of the year, let me know what your top 3 books of 2022 were, so I update my stack. And if you have read any of the books mentioned in the video, please feel free to let me know in the comments, and we can definitely always discuss it. And I very much appreciate the support so far once again. I hope you all have a lovely holiday season. I am still in school at this point, but yeah, almost done. So yeah, thank you all, and bye.